Hello YouTube, I hope everyone is safe. As my audience knows, I have been collecting reports about contemporary to an extent. Reports about underwater humanoids from China, Central Asia, Caucasus lands and Russia. I have heard rumors about strange creatures observed in West Ukrainian lakes, but rumors are just that. But I have been collecting information about a very strange underwater humanoid who lived in Hungary in the 18th century, and his story is more than just rumors, as you will see. What I suspect, there might have been more like him, and they may exist in Transcarpathia, but I do not have enough to go on about contemporary cryptozoological creatures found in those lands. But let's look at the strange tale of Hani Ishtok, and I will repeat several details to show you various sources I have used: Hungarian, German and Belarusian. I do ask my Hungarian listeners to forgive my pronunciation, and also some of the text may sound archaic, as I try to retain the 18th century flavor of East European writings. So this happened in the Kingdom of Hungary, ruled by Queen Maria Theresa, wife and empress of the Holy Roman Emperor Francis I. Part of the national park of Ferto Hanhani is the Hanhani, which is called Hani in the popular language of the region. That's where the ancient, undisturbed, rich marshlands have evolved. And probably something else evolved there as well. As strange as those cryptozoological creatures I have told you about in my other videos, but evolved to the east from that land. That's the stories I told you before. Whatever happened in this marshland, well, the people of Hani have created a peculiar belief and folklore over the marshland, mysteriously around the yellowish, bluish bright lights that appear here and there. These mysterious ghostly lights were created by the self-ignition of the gases from the marshland, but according to popular belief, the little terrestrial fires flashed to people in the area and brought them to death, drawing greedy people to their deaths, hovering over buried treasures reported to be in the area. Today only a few small lakes remain from the wildland, which guard the mysterious atmosphere of the former wildlife country. Kapuvar is a small but ancient picturesque town in the northwestern corner of Hungary. It is located 50 kilometers from Győr and 40 kilometers from Sopron, in the vicinity of Sopron, Kofahaza, Fertiod border stations. We will start with the church records. This wild child, who will be given the name István and at his baptism, is mentioned in the register of the parish of Kapuvar. On March 17, 1749, Ferenc Nagy and Mihály Molnár, fishermen from Kapuvar, caught in the swamp that stretches between the royal forest and the Királyi tó, or King's Lake, a boy who looked like a wild beast, whose shape was perfectly human and who could be 10 years old. He was taken to the castle. Since the child could not speak, he was conditionally baptized, introducing into the formula the words, "If you really are a man." István lived naked, did not speak, and fed on raw meat and wild herbs. According to witnesses, he was an excellent swimmer and was able to catch fish underwater for food. For a year he was kept at the Esterházy Palace in Fertiod, but then he escaped, and we never saw him again. Another version of the story was this one. Once upon a time, said the old fisherman of Kapuvar, a child was taken from the King's Lake, who, while completely naked, was not cold because his body was covered in fish scales. He was half man, half fish. The web between his fingers was tense. He did not eat cooked food, but fed on snakes and frogs. They brought him to the castle in Kapuvar, and because they did not know if he was baptized, they baptized him. The groundskeeper himself took over the duties of the godfather. In baptism, he was named Istvan, and because he was found in the backlands, he was named Hani Ishtok. Hani Ishtok was afraid of people. He kicked and bit every time you went near him. He preferred to hide in the dark corridors of the castle or to swim in the ditches surrounding the castle. Later, when he was accustomed to human society, he allowed them to put clothes on him, to dress him. Hani was happiest when they put red pants on him. He was also doing small chores around the kitchen, chopping wood, carrying water, sweeping. Hani slowly developed taste in boiled food, but he preferred to eat frogs. He was enrolled in a school where the master often threatened him for being a bully. Time passed and Hani became a man. At the time, the bailiff had a daughter whom he liked to hang around with. And finally, he fell in love with this girl. It is no wonder then that when the girl gave her hand not to Hani but to someone else, with this certainty he swore an oath to avenge himself. The wedding was in full swing, and the joy was abundant. When Hani Ishtok came to the party and placed a plate covered with a cloth on the table, when the guests raised the shawl or cloth with curiosity, frogs jumped out of the bowl and snakes came out. Then the guard took Hani Ishtok and he was beaten. And then in his sorrow that his wishes to be kind were misunderstood, he jumped into the lake and disappeared forever. Well, what else could he give as a present? Think about it. Anyway, Hungarian writer Zsókai Mort was inspired by this story to write his novel Neftelenvár, The Nameless Castle, published in 1877. Who knows what sources he used? But here's an excerpt from his book. "Marie!" he cried out, terrified, and with one hand holding hers, holding it on the waist of the girl, pulled her out of the wave and took her into his lap. "What's the matter? What's chasing you?" The girl trembled, her teeth shuddered so that she could not answer. Her breath was breathless, and she was suffocated. Her big eyes filled with horror. Louise looked around and saw nothing, but a few minutes later something came up. What is it? Human or animal? They had the face of a man, perhaps, but the face of a man covered with short hair, and the skull, instead of the hair, is covered with grooves of otter, with two long ears raised sharply. The mouth of the figure so tightened that his lips were not visible, his nostrils flattened, barely visible, but his eyes, like a fish, open and round, expression of anger all over the face. The mysterious monster appeared right near the boat. Louis took one oar with two hands to crush the head of the phenomenon, but his heavy blow only hit the mere foam. The beast fell suddenly and could be seen in the deep translucent wave of moonbeams. How it fled away, not in the way of a man, but unusually like a prehistoric wonder, pushing itself away and disappearing into the depths of water, where man's eyes no longer see anything but the fish. And then Louis never saw him come up again. Okay, now let's look at other sources of information, including interesting research conducted by noted Belarusian historian Valery Shishanov, deputy director of the Vitebsk Regional Museum of Local Lore. And his information was published in a Belarus UFOCOM site. In March 1749, a strange human being was captured by the fishermen of Kapuvar from the ghostly lit marsh world of Hani. He appeared to be an 8 to 10-year-old child with double eyelids and the webbing between his hands and feet. In fact, it's on 17th of March of 1749 in the church of Kapuvar. A boy of about 8 years of age was conditionally baptized, and in baptism he was named Istvan. According to contemporary writings, the boy was naked, eating grass, hay and straw, no clothes, and when he saw a man, he jumped into the water and swam about like a fish. Later he lived in the castle for a year, ate cooked food, wore the dress, and began to become human on the outside. Well, probably he jumped into a river not far from the castle and swam to the backlands. They never found him again. The creature in question could be classified as a Mowgli, that is, feral children caught living among animals. But if you believe the descriptions, the structure of the body of this creature had significant features that bring it closer to the mythological inhabitants of lakes and swamps. And I told you about some of them, my audience. Now, in Russia, the discussion about this creature unfolded after the publication in 1832 in German of Travels in Hungary in 1831 by Samuel Ludwig. Ludwig was German but was born into a bookseller's family in the small Hungarian town of Keszeg. Not satisfied with the family business, the young man received a law degree and settled in Pest. However, the travel-obsessed Ludwig, as secretary to Prince Friedrich von Schwarzenberg, made trips to Turkey, Greece, Wallachia, that's where Moldavia is now, Romania, and Transylvania. In 1831, he traveled to Hungary, and the following year published a description of this trip. The book sharply condemned the policy of the authorities towards the Hungarian rural population, proved the need for reforms and the abolition of serfdom. So the publication was confiscated. But nevertheless, the book was widespread, circulated about, and several reviews of it appeared in various European publications. A particularly lengthy review by an unknown author was published in September of 1834 in the London newspapers The Athenaeum. Already in October, with some liberties in translation, an episode of the review of The Waterman appears in St. Petersburg magazine Library for Reading in Russia, and the critic sneers at the gullible traveler. Someone, Mr. Ludwig, recently traveled in Hungary, because now everyone travels, and publishes journey in German, because now the Germans also publish about travel. It would not have been a problem, but he tells things in German that have not been told in Chinese for a long time. The circumstance which we will mention might be considered a joke, if in his whole book there were any other inclination to be facetious. On the contrary, Mr. Ludwig never laughs, and does not like to laugh when traveling. Then what followed, without any comment, was the translation of the above-mentioned fragment from Ludwig's book. And listen to this. From Raab we went to Pankot, and from there to Esterhazy, and went out in front of the castle to look at the remains of the ancient splendor, with which it shone when the princes lived here, its rulers. Here we came across 4 Viennese residents who also wanted to visit Hungary, and together with them went through the rooms of the castle. One of them has a beautiful collection of Chinese porcelain. The whole is extensive and notable for its excellent alfresco. Most of the rooms are painted in the Chinese style, sometimes like on the golden ground. Here we see image of the wonderful animal that was caught in the neighboring lake Nazidler in the last year of the last century. It is just like a man, but covered with scales and equipped with fish feathers. Under careful supervision, This sea wonder gradually got used to human life and served in the kitchen as chef. It ate nothing but raw fish and toads and made no sound. At last, when they ceased to fear that the monster might escape and gave it complete freedom, it longed for the land and perhaps feared the lash with which it was often threatened, and in a good hour slipped away into the lake. Natural history does not give us any information about this breed of animal, and the appearance of underwater man to this day remains an inexplicable mystery. The peculiarity of the legend is that it is based not only on oral traditions, but also on two handwritten documents. The oldest of them is a record dated March 17, 1749, about the baptism of a strange monster caught at March 15 in the parish of Kapuvar. And the second, where this story is described in more detail, the report of the official Paul Rosenstiengel, which is dated between the years 1788 to 1801. The report says that fishermen Ferenc Nadem and Mihai Molnar caught a naked boy of 10 years old, similar in behavior to a wild animal. He ate grass, hay, did not suffer without clothes, felt great in the water. The boy spent almost a year in the castle, got used to clothing, participated in cooking. But when they got used to him and relaxed their surveillance, he jumped into the water and ran away. The monster began to be called Hani Ishtok, and in print the first mention of it appeared in the Description of Hungary, published in 1799 by the famous geographer and statistician Andras Valyi. But a landmark for the promotion of the legend was 1801, I think they mean the hallmark, when first in the Freiburger Zeitung, then in the Wiener Zeitung, then with reference to Vienna newspaper in the periodical of Stuttgart, Weimar, Hamburg, a new version appeared, according to which the creature was seen repeatedly and was caught in 1776. The legend of the Aquaman, der Wassermann, as the creature became known in the German language press, has acquired new details. The boy turned into a young man of about 17. His fingers were 2 times longer than usual, and there were webs between them. Most of the body was covered with scales. The arms and legs were slightly bent from moving on 4 limbs. With the greatest appetite he ate raw fish and crayfish. After a while, the waterman was taught to wear clothes. He became obedient, learned to pronounce some words, but never got used to flour and meat dishes. And yet attempts at socialization failed. When after 3/4 of a year, the surveillance weakened, the waterman or Aquaman jumped right in his clothes into the moat with water and disappeared. The newspapers assured of the authenticity of the story. And in Russia, there were people who decided to support this really happened phenomenon hypothesis with their arguments and explanations. In 2 issues of the Northern Bee newspaper, February 9 and 11, 1835, the arguments of the director of the School of Civil Engineers, Lieutenant General Fyodor Andreevich Kozin, were published. Fyodor Andreevich served at various times in the departments of foreign and military affairs, and he observed a lot. In his letter, Kozin refers to the authority of Immanuel Kant, the famous German philosopher, who placed the story of the Aquaman in his book Physical Geography. The correspondent attributed the capture of the creature to 1800 and retold the story of its capture and his stay among people. Having doubts, Kozin nevertheless, in his amazement, remembered Shakespeare saying that there are many things going on earth and under the ground that our philosophers have not even dreamed of, and went to Vienna, where a few days after his arrival he met Prince Esterhazy's nephew, Count Wolkenstein. So, the Russian lieutenant general traveled to Vienna to find out if this story was true. The Count confirmed everything as an eyewitness. When he learned about it, he immediately went there to see the wonderful waterman and found him placed in a storage tank filled with water. The inhabitants there, in consultation with the fishermen, found, in their opinion, this means the best way to ease the creature's despair from imprisonment and save his life, believing that he needed water as much as a fish. And so he almost died. He could not be more than a quarter an hour in the water without surfacing even for a second to inhale atmospheric air. From this it follows that the aquatic people, having enough clean air in the big lake, had required every quarter of an hour to stick out of the water their head so as not to choke. And he certainly would have suffered from that in short time in the tank and finally die if the Count had not ordered him to be taken out and kept in the room. Kozin also presents a hypothesis about the reasons for the appearance of the aquatic man. Well, a woman of certain condition, pregnant, accidentally drowned in this lake, and at the same time got rid or gave birth to the burden, to the baby. When infants are in the womb, the heart is formed as in all amphibians with two open cavities, ventriculi cordis, but in infants after birth, as soon as he breathes air into himself, one cavity of the heart suddenly closes and overgrows, from which he loses the ability to exist in water, while in amphibians after birth, both cavities of hearts remain open, from which they can freely breathe and live in water and on earth. And so the baby born in the water retained this feature like amphibians, and nature, with the developments of its physical strength, adopted it exactly as wonderfully as it preserved among the animals and all possible dangers of babies once abandoned in the forest. As we can see, the Age of Enlightenment did not dispel misconceptions, superstitions, and traditions, but gave an opportunity for pseudoscientific various explanations. Kozin also expressed regret that the Prince Esterhazy did not allow the naturalists to study the waterman. It must be assumed that for him, supernatural incidents were not unusual, that he hoped to catch more such people in his lake, and therefore, not seeing the need to order this waterman to be brought to Vienna, he found it much more useful to leave him as a chef's assistant in the kitchen of his steward. I ask my audience to remember this statement from the Russian Lieutenant General about the Hungarian prince's attitude to supernatural incidents and hopes for catching more such people as honey Ishtok in his lake. It is curious that apparently realizing the irretrievability of the loss, that he was unable to retrieve it, one of the princes of Esterhazy Castle ordered a statue of the waterman which guests could see in his palace, as Ludwig and other authors described. In conclusion, Kozin, also with reference to Immanuel Kant, retold the story of Francisco de la Vega Casar, the fisherman of Yerganes, which dates back to the 1670s according to legend. A young man from the small Spanish village of Yerganes, while in Bilbao and while swimming, was carried into the sea, and 5 years later was caught by fishermen. Francisco turned into a fishman. He forgot how to speak, and after much questioning could only pronounce the name of the village in which he was born. The young man was taken to his homeland, but his mental abilities were completely muddled, and the fishman could not be used for anything else except for delivering letters. After 9 years of living in his native home, Francisco swam away into the sea. It is believed that life between people finally, in fact, seemed stupid to him, and he returned again to the society of fish. I want my audience to remember how Fyodor Andreevich Kozin was very much interested in the developments with the story of this aquatic man, and just because of that he went to Vienna. Apparently he collected such stories, and we need to look a little bit more into his experiences, if possible, and what he was engaged in, because it brings up some ideas. Nevertheless, despite skepticism in the academic circles over the past 250 years, the story of the aquatic man from Kapuvar, Hani Ishtok, has acquired a very significant historiography and has repeatedly found a response in fiction, theater, and music, I assume in Hungary and Central Europe mostly. I will add to this that in Western Ukraine, where my beautiful wife is from, there have been stories about strange creatures in local lakes, and the territory there had been a part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and really not that far away from Hungary. I am from Eastern Ukraine, and we have our own legends and tales of strange creatures. Remember, Ukraine's history is thousands of years old, and I can attest to it. As a boy, I and my friends discovered ancient weapons and artifacts in the hills of Kiev. And below the city lie ancient tunnels, eerie places with uncanny history, where people have encountered, well, that's for future videos. I thank you for listening and watching my videos, and I thank those who supported me, and I ask that if you can, please do support my research, and you can see how in the links to this video. And I do want to bring more stories about the strange aquatic creatures and more than that, but related in a way. And of course other stories, as I promised, about the dolphins and other what you could call paranormal developments in my former homeland, in the former Soviet Union, and contemporary Eurasia. Thank you, and Happy New Year to all of you.